All right, and welcome to the Best in Slot podcast, a workout podcast by the community for the community. I'm your main host, Sparty, and my co-host Midgettes here is here as well. This is episode 7, so today we'll be talking about really the world first race, the week of Mythic, and what to do as a player if you aren't in for those kills, if you're on the bench. So really, glad to have you back here. You're still sticking around with us. It's been 7 weeks already that we've done these. 7 episodes?
7 weeks, and we've been having a great time, and we've had some great topics.
I'm
really
just,
looking...
Yeah, no, I'm
Go
just
ahead.
really impressed that we've gone 7 weeks. That's awesome, right? It's flying
I'm
by.
astonished that you've made 7 weeks. Let's be real clear on this.
Me too. I am also very impressed with myself that I've made it to 7 weeks here with this this podcast idea. It's exciting.
Well,
So
I think
let's.
it's being well received by the community so far.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the feedback's been fantastic. People have been submitting some questions as well for future podcast episodes, which is definitely what we want more of. It's been good discussions, and we're hoping to have a couple fun guests, coming up here and during the Christmas season or the Winter Veil season, as well as into the next year. So I'm excited for it. It's good.
Are we bringing Father Winter?
Well, we'll see. Hey, do you know why Father Winter planted a vegetable garden?
Oh no, why?
So he could ho 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 all year long.
Oh my goodness.
All right. That is my my requisite
Dad
one
joke
dad joke.
for the day.
That's
All
right. For the next hour.
So,
All right. So let's start off with what's new in the community. So Midges, you had a really good point here as to what's happening in the community now with this Save Haiti thing. Save Hattie. I don't know how to pronounce this dog's name.
I can't believe... I think it's Haiti.
Okay.
Save Haiti.
Save Haiti.
And if you have a hunter and you went through the opening cinematic for your artifact, you became very attached to this hunter pet. And there's a forum post in Petopia, which is a hunter pet forum, have all started this Save Haiti. And I want to read just a little bit of what they have said in their forum post, which is, in essence, we know our artifacts are headed for destruction, decommission at the end of Legion. This will probably mean the destruction of Haiti, the wolf who is bound to Titan strike. Many of us are very sad at this prospect. The quest to save Haiti's life was the most unique and best told artifact quest I experienced, and the loss of Haiti would mean that all of it was ultimately in vain and would make the culmination of the story very bleak. And I know that within my experiences, it was one of my favorite artifact quests, and I am very fond of Haiti when he's not in my way, which is frequently. But the passion that came from the community and the hunter community on saving their pet has been wonderful. And it opens up a lot of things that we can talk about.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that's a really cool and unique thing the community is trying to do, right? I mean, everybody loves dogs, right? And they want to save their little wolf, dog, pet, whatever it is. It's got a great attachment, and it's really testament to, again, the Blizzard universe and how much attachment we have to a lot of those things in games and how much they resonate with us, right? We want to keep that dog forever. And yeah, it's bound to your artifact, and the artifact's going to be gone next expansion. But I think with this kind of feedback from the community, Blizzard always listens to this kind of stuff and like, hey, we'll give you a tameable, Haiti pet at some point.
Well, and I can only hope that we get to keep him in some level because he was bound to the weapon and he became a part of us, and so we have to keep him. But we is sort of a misnomer, I think. You don't even have dog in Dalaran yet, do you?
Is that the one with the pebble?
Yes, that's the one with the pebble.
Yeah. I get that. I got that pebble one.
He's in Dalaran? Do you go visit him?
I gave him a pebble. Isn't that all he really needs?
I'm glad I'm not your dog.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So,
Speaking of dogs, we're going to jump to dragons. Did you see that Celestalon moved to Hearthstone?
That's sort of been the worst kept secret in the last couple months. We sort of knew a lot of us that are friends of him know that he's been moving on to bigger and brighter pastures. He's moving on to Hearthstone, which is sort of where his passion lies now. He's been a huge part of the community for a long, long time. He's been the face of the Warcraft devs class balance team, and I've known him for a couple of years now, both as a rival guildmaster, rival raid leader back in Cataclysm when he was playing in Midnight Sanctuary on Stormrage, to him as the Warcraft dev, to the guy who's came into our stream here, the guy who's dyed my hair at the Legion movie premiere. No, I mean he's been a huge face of the community, right? And that's where all the positive and negative comments have gone. So, I mean, he's done a fantastic job, right? People don't realize, the scope of that class team, and, he's always been the brunt of people's frustration of why their class gets nerfed by 5% or 4% or something else gets buffed. That being said, it's not really been his decision, but he's the face of the Warcraft devs most often, right? And he was totally fine doing that, right? He was a very public and personable person too. So, whether he was the target or not the right target, he definitely got hit with a lot of stuff. I don't know, we've had our own podcast, right? That little letter I wrote to the Blizzard dev was actually to him when, he needed a bit of a pep talk. But, I mean, he's been a fantastic guy. I know he's going to do great things in Hearthstone. And Hearthstone is, really fantastic now.
Well, I have faith that there will be somebody else to blame soon, and we'll add the customary trademark to that.
Oh, for sure.
But he's done a great job, and we all have come to love the dragon. And I don't know if you saw the Hearthstone card he used to show it, but he's spreading purple everywhere. I want that card.
It's awesome. I thought that was really, really well done, that card.
Now I heard that you really enjoyed Hearthstone's new game. You want to tell us a little bit about the dungeon? I know I was up way too late the first night myself. I stayed up until like 2 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't turn it off.
So it hasn't been just me. This new, the Kobolds and Catacombs is the new Hearthstone expansion. I know we talk about Warcraft, but this is a really important tangent here. It's taken up so much of my time playing this thing. Like, I'm playing it at work. I'm playing it, on the bus the other day. Just playing it while I'm waiting. Like, again, it's a single player dungeon, so you can sort of pick up whenever you want, and it's very randomized. So it's Rogue Legacy style where it's always different. I really, really enjoy it. I don't know how much I can say that. Like, I guess this is the reason why Blizzard invented that invisible mode, right? So I could go play Kobolds and Catacombs. It's so much fun. I've unlocked I've finished the dungeon on 3 different classes now. But I don't know, I've spent hours and hours and hours upon this thing, and I really enjoy it. I really want to finish the Keldarar, the sword, on one of my characters at some point. But I mean, I love it. The randomness, it's everything I wanted, right? So I really like it. If you guys haven't picked it up, I mean, it's free. Go play it. It's super, super fun, right?
Wait a minute. Let's go back just a couple of sentences. What is this? You like the appear offline mode now?
Well, then I don't feel so embarrassed I've been playing this until 2, 3 a.m. and, I'm popping up as, I don't know. I was doing both last night. I was actually playing Hearthstone while doing stuff in game and talking to apps and getting some work done. So it's nice to, it doesn't time out my turns, right? So I'm able to do it whenever.
Wait a minute. No. A month ago you were like, I don't understand this appear offline mode, and now you're using it? Sheesh.
Yeah. But I just want to be like, I just want to do my own little thing for a little bit and not get bothered. That being said, I can be bothered anytime, so.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll keep that in mind the next time you give me crap about appear offline.
Yeah.
Hey, did you see the latest tweet from SCO? Because I know we're all watching the World Race.
The World First Race, as I sort of gently laugh at the World First Race. So at this point, there are 5 guilds that are 10 out of 11. It's Method, Exorcist, Limit. There is that other Alliance guild. I forgot their last 2 names here. What are they? Memento and Bleached Bones, which I haven't really heard of. These guys too much. So yeah, I mean, 5 guilds, 10 out of 11. That race is definitely interesting, and I think the message or the video from SCO was, yeah, all these bosses are fairly linear in terms of difficulty. They're fairly easy, and then it really, really steps up. With Argus, and some people are saying it is mathematically impossible. I think I've heard that one before.
Was Kill Jaden mathematically impossible?
Well, I don't know. Is it mathematically impossible for them to, stop saying it's mathematically impossible, when it is. I don't know. I mean, at that point, it's all a bunch of chirping, and you take it with a grain of salt. And these encounters have been tuned, and yes, we had tuning issues in Tomb of Sargeras, right, where they said, yeah, this is pretty good tuning for those high mythic guilds. Let's crank it up a couple of percentage points, and they did find some of those encounters were a little bit too difficult. That being said, these top guilds have so many split raids, right? So they're doing so many raids per week in order to gear the characters that they're 3 months ahead of heroic gear going to these encounters as well. So that's part of the reason the tuning's there.
It's interesting because over the years, the world race has lost some of its appeal to me, because there's usually some sort of issue or drama or something that comes up, and honestly, I think there's a part of me that sort of watches it, but I don't enjoy it like I used to, and I certainly don't enjoy it like I do the MDIs. One of the big things is the last tier. There was the big breakup with Sloot going on and creating Future, and they started streaming the world race, which makes it much more exciting. We have to thank Sloot for that.
Oh, for sure.
And we've gotten the raid kill videos out much sooner, but I'm just not sold on the whole world race thing anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that a lot of these guilds are streaming their progress, right? It's not as secretive of a thing as it used to be. I don't know. This whole world first race is one big Olympics, right? It is one big Olympics, and I guess that'll take us to our next little segment, the Sparty soapbox, where Sparty will complain and do his thing about this whole world first race. Now, the whole world first race has been really whatever standards we want to put in place, right? We put our own artificial rules for what is technically world first, right? Is it world first within the same time period, within, X time? So for instance, if for instance, right, Limit had cleared all the bosses the first night, right, and then EU hadn't even gotten a chance to raid, would that be world first? Technically, yes, no. In previous expansions, we had guilds transferring from server to server to server, buying up BOEs to give themselves that competitive edge, and a website like WoW Progress said, no, that's not allowed. It's a player-run website, right? So we put our own little artificial things, our own little limitations in front of that. That being said, right, I sort of bring this back to the Olympics and the whole, Russian doping thing that's going on there and the whistles that have been blown there. Right, a lot of these guilds have been clearly suspended, banned, cheating, whatever, exploiting over the past couple years, right? And sort of where does that stop, right? At what point do we as a community continue to support these guilds? And I'm not, going to call any guilds out, but the ones that have been, character sharing, doing, breaking TOS stuff, whatever. And yes, Blizzard's enforcement of these rules has been varied, has been mixed. That being said, right, it's clearly against TOS, exploiting behaviors, on Helia, for instance, that was the last one, a lot of account sharing, and we don't need to get into, hey, the other guild is doing it, so we should as well, right? Hey, if you're speeding because the other guy's speeding, but you get caught, and you complain to the cop that, hey, but the other guy was doing it too. Well, okay, but you were still in the wrong, right? It doesn't matter who else was doing it. It's you got caught doing it, and that's really what matters. With the whole Olympics thing, right? You got the Russians doping up there, and really everybody's doing it though, right? The Lance Armstrongs, the Ben Johnsons, everybody's doing it and still sort of supporting these teams, whether it's the one-off guy or it's the entire team state sponsoring it. And really, we need to get to a point where we get to the Super Olympics. And what I mean by that is everybody should be doping up. Everybody should be taking steroids. Everybody should be taking every single cutting-edge thing they can, right? Genetic enhancements, just go full on until we have this breed of super soldier athletes, right? The next genetically superior, athlete out there. Well, should we do the same with the world first race, right? Since it's not truly a very fair race, should we just let anything go, right? Anything go at all? Maybe, right? But again, it comes down to, well, do we continue supporting guilds? Do we continue supporting that kind of behavior? I'm really glad that Blizzard has gone back and reminded guilds, hey, listen, don't be a bunch of bad people. Don't break those TOS because we're giving you that warning this time that you complained about, right? Last time guilds were complaining, well, we didn't get a warning. we just got banned outright for breaking TOS and sharing accounts and exploiting behaviors. You didn't need to warn us. I mean, the warning is sort of the TOS that you sign when you do log into the game, right? But
Right.
I guess they needed a special warning because, as an adult, you can choose to be a child at any time. That's the difference between an adult and a child. You choose to act like a child. All right.
Exactly.
Well, let's move on.
Well, let's move on. The only other thing I have to comment on the world race is I like to see who wins, and I'll be glad when it's over. But I honestly root for the people that I feel that are trying to get to that boss with a good heart and good intentions. And unfortunately for the world race in general, I just don't feel that way. Moving on, though, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I sort of feel the same way. I used to be really gung ho about the world first race years ago. These days, not so much. I sort of know what's expected. I'm tired of the complaining of, this is all forest and too much AP and too many alts, right? I mean, I'm tired of it. I'm hoping some of the friends that I like, win the world first race, or I'm enjoying seeing them progress. But I'm not as enthralled as I used to be. So
I'm going to put my energy into the MDI.
Oh yes, MDI is really, I think, where the next edge will be, and that's really something that's much more sponsored by Blizzard, and I think we're all looking forward to it. The success of the MDIs, yeah, absolutely.
Well, since we're talking about Antorus and we've got past the world first, I know that Death Jesters last week went through the first four bosses. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on them?
Well, let's take that into our next little section here. So let's go into, I guess, the keys to a kill, which is our section and advice on on the bosses, on how to really improve your guild, your team, and go from there. So my thoughts on the first boss is Garoth, the garbage dumper, whatever you want to call him. Again, it was fairly easy tuned boss, very, I don't know, similar in difficulty in terms of Hellfire Assault from Hellfire Citadel, Scorpion. It's a very easy first boss. And I say easy, partly because guilds like mine, the average mythic guild, we outgear these tremendously. We outgear them so much that it's not really, an issue. A lot of guilds do, right? The average guild that is, I don't know, that was 5 or 6 bosses in. This will probably be around their playing field in terms of get a couple wipes in and go. We one-shot Garothi Worldbreaker, we 2-shot Fellhounds of Sargeras, we 3-shot Antoran High Command, and I think we had 5 wipes on Portal Keeper Hazabel, and we almost got ENR as well, all within, 3-4 hours. So I don't know, the tuning's been, yes, fairly easy. I was going to say initially, yeah, everybody's just overgearing it, everyone's doing split raids, but the tuning is definitely a little bit on the easier side. I would have anticipated that the average guild like mine only gets 3, maybe 4 bosses in a week. Realistically, we're going to have ENR down on Monday and some really good progress on Iminar as well. So the tuning has been easier. I'm a little disappointed. Again, my biggest worry is that if guilds are going through this content too quickly, and in the next few weeks we've already cleared Mythic Antorus, not just because of tuning, but because of how proficient we are as raiders and how much more intelligent we've gotten over the years, there's going to be a huge lull in content again, right? So by putting in... Go ahead.
Well, that's a viable concern, and I was actually talking to somebody about the ease because I thought it had been really good for morale. But one of the points that they made is because the last tier was so much more difficult that they came in more experienced, and maybe Blizzard wasn't quite expecting that because they had it so many challenges in TOS that they actually got better as players, and this became much easier content than even Blizzard expected. What do you think about that thought?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can go back down as far as Molten Core, right? Had I known what I know about raiding now, going into Molten Core and Nixie and all those other bosses that, again, were so much easier compared to what we have now, we would have been doing server first, no problem, left, right, and center, how to really... train our players. I'm not too worried about difficulty at this point. Yes, it's easier, but we are getting much better as players, right? That's also the other thing to take home. We have better gear going into it. it's tuned a little bit easier, but Tomb of Sargeras was definitely tuned on the higher end, right? They definitely made some mistakes in terms of tuning. This might be their way of, okay, well, let's dial it down, but they might have dialed it down too far where guilds are progressing too much. The other big change to note there, and I mentioned this on our podcast, I think a week or two ago, so they actually buffed Argus by a couple of percentage points. I think 10% for normal and heroic across the board. And then they fixed one of the soul bomb mechanics, which actually wasn't present for ours. And then, of course, Coven was also fixed. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens in terms of tuning. We'll see how guilds go. Again, my concern is what's going to happen 3 months down the line. Whether this tuning's going to be too easy, or is Battle for Azeroth so far along the pipeline that we can actually see PTR, see beta relatively soon?
Or some people might go back and try to finish up that previous tier, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure.
I know I'm liking it a little bit easier just because the elite raiders in my world are more happy.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's always nice getting kills, and I mean, like you said, it's good for morale, right? It's good for morale to be getting these kills and to see your team progressing when it really struggled on Tomb of Sargeras, right? And kills are kills, however they look, right? Whether you have one guy alive or 20 people alive, they're all a kill. Doesn't matter. Same on the scoreboard.
Well, and I do know that I'm seeing a whole lot more people back, which means that a lot of the teams are having more bench problems, so to speak. I know for our first heroic run through Argus, we had 32 people, and so that means 2 people are sitting out. So we've got people that are now on the bench.
Yeah.
So I'm on the bench. Now what? What do I do, Sparty?
You're on the bench. What do you do? Again, it depends on what kind of guild you're in terms of the expectations. If you're in a guild like mine and you're sitting out for a mythic encounter, well, the expectation is you are on Mumble listening. You are listening to the strat changes. You're following along. So you're not, completely in the blind. Hey, we changed that strat 3 attempts ago. Why weren't you paying attention? Because now we're wiping it because just lack of listening. A number of us have different streams that are running, so we're definitely going, you're expected to watch those streams, listen to Mumble. We don't have stream Mumble, but you're expected to listen to Mumble and see how the fight is progressing when it's on progression, for instance. So those are some of the things. Yeah, you're going through logs as the guild's going through it, right? That's something that I'm often doing. So, for instance, I sat out on ENR to give the other paladin a little bit more experience. I was in for the first 4 mythic bosses. He was in for 1 or 2, and I said, okay, let's get him in for boss number, I can't remember, 5 or something, which is totally fine. So what was I doing? Well, I was watching other streams. I was watching Zorania's streams, our rogue, listening to Mumble, and again, going through logs, right? That's what I would expect any other raider to be doing.
Well, I'm just going to leave in the middle of the night because I didn't get to raid.
Sucks to be you, right? And now what, right? So now you're gonna be missing out on all that progress, right? So it's as if you weren't there at all. You should have just not shown up at all, right? But players that are there and waiting, and sometimes when you're on that bench, like if you're playing a sport, you're not just sort of sleeping on the bench, right? You're not just going to the change room and not watching the game. Well, you're watching and learning and seeing what everyone else is doing and seeing how the opposing team or the other boss, right, is doing. How can you learn from that time on the bench? You definitely can, right? There's definitely learning opportunities from there, and you shouldn't just be, asleep on the bench or not showing up because you're not going to be on the first line that night.
Well, I'm often on the bench, but some of that is by design because I do so much other things for the community. I just don't have the time to dedicate to raiding.
Yep.
But I know one of the things last night they were talking about, wanting a weak aura that would help. We were having some problems with moving too far, and so I helped and I went and looked for a weak aura. Even on the bench, though, there's a lot of things you can do to help. I know I looked up weak auras, or oh no, we're out of something, and I get it in the guild bank for them. But I try to be active even on the bench, and I make sure that I'm still out there. And it's one of the things, even as a backup, that for me, I want to make sure that the team knows that I'm truly there as a backup.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like you said, there's so many things that these players could be doing outside. It's not about just performance, right? It's, well, can you contribute to weak auras? Can you read the logs? Can you be, there in case we run out of consumables? We anticipated we're going to use, 400 potions, but we went through 400 super quickly, and now we need another 100, however many to go for the rest of the night. Having somebody to help support the team is always super, super vital. You always want to be investing into the team wherever you can. And then really looking to improve yourself as a player, right? So part of that is weak auras. Part of that is talking to other players, right? So, for instance, I was in on Portal Keeper Hazabel, and the other Paladin app, Adamax, was sitting out. So we were talking in our Paladin chat, well, what do you think about this position? What do you think about this aura? And how do you want to use these talents on this encounter? And, it was really good discussion while he was outside, and we were bouncing ideas back and forth, right? Because the log showed one thing, but what I was doing in the fight was something different. So again, having those kind of sounding boards is always fantastic, right? So
well, and as a player, I can see things if I'm just watching your stream, or I can be looking at the logs, whereas you're playing. It's great to offer that feedback.
For sure.
But what if I'm never in for a first kill? I want to raid too. I want to play too.
Okay, well, I mean, everybody does want to raid. I've been doing this for 12 plus years since Molten Core. I can count on one hand how many bosses I've missed, right? Missed first kills on. But even I, the guildmaster of nearly 13 years, has missed first boss kills. I think it's very unrealistic to have an expectation of being in for every single boss, because you cannot guarantee 100% attendance, right? Because there's emergencies, and there's power outages, and there's internet issues, and there's whatever else you want out there. You're going to be in there for, 99% of the time, which is fine. So I've been in for 90% of the time, but outside of emergencies and work obligations and things like that, you may miss those first kills. But what do? Well, you just need to work your way up, right? It's sort of like joining any kind of sports team. You work your way up slowly, you start on the 4th line, 3rd line, whatever it is, until people have that trust in you that you are ready to go. And that's something that we're going to look on in our next little segment here, but you just need to, wait a little bit, improve where you can. When you get your shot, you do your best. You do your best and go from there.
What if I just joined the guild? Should I expect to make it in on these first kills, or where does that fall into things?
Again, it depends on the guild. That's actually one of the interview questions we ask of, like, how much playing does this person really expect to be in for, right? Given that they're a brand new applicant to the guild, we've seen their logs, we haven't seen them perform in a raid setting with us. Do they expect to be in for every single kill? Well, listen, if you're, I don't know, lowest in the meters and you're not doing mechanics and you're not getting interrupts, then you're not going to be in. You're not one of the best 20, right? What does it take to be one of the best 20 to be in that raid? Sometimes it's composition issues, right? Sometimes we want more ranged or healers or melee or running 3 tanks, for instance, which is partly out of your control. But otherwise, you have to be one of those best players for that team, right? Those decisions should be made based off what is best for the guild, what is best for the raid, not based off seniority or who's dating who or whatever other crappy reasons people have, right? It's always comes down to what is best for the guild.
Well, and maybe that's something we should cover. What, on the leadership side of a raid team, should you do when you have a roster that is bigger?
Well, let's go into our last little segment here, which is the leadership lounge. So, what do we do, right? We have that roster size of 20 plus players, right, for a mythic team. Generally, a fairly healthy roster is 25, 26, 27 players. So there will always be somebody sitting out for the team. We run a system where we don't really have alts or split raids or things like that. We just have, the one player playing their DPS or healer or tank, whatever it is. So again, well, how do you make these decisions as to who goes in on an encounter? Oftentimes it's not seniority, but it is also seniority based, so more experience based. For instance, will I bring in, let's say I have a brand new tank applicant. Will I bring in a brand new tank applicant over the tried and true method of, Towley and Deadman as tanks, right? Probably not, especially not on our very first mythic kills, because I know what our 2 tanks are capable of, and I'll likely, bring in the new tank on some farm content, maybe a new boss if we feel he's ready. We'll sort of quiz that guy, hey, do you know what these mechanics do? Do you know how the strat's going? And a lot of that is done prior to those raids. So none of it is... No, go ahead.
Well, I don't know. On Tally's birthday week, I would probably bring in the app.
Well, Tally's birthday week is a whole different situation entirely. But yeah, I mean, again, it varies depending on the situation. If our tank has to leave early, or listen, our tank's just sick or not feeling well. We actually had to bring in Deadman during Siege of Orgrimmar progression on Garrosh. Towley had internet connection issues, and we had this brand new tank, Deadman, our Death Knight tank, and we're like, hey, Towley's having connection issues. You're coming in here. You've never. I don't think he had been doing much heroic / mythic progression before, but we brought him right into, threw him right into the fire, and he did pretty well, right? He did pretty decently for that first night there, and sometimes that's what you have to do.
I remember that night, Deadman had trial by fire, but he did pretty good.
Yeah, he did. He was pretty solid.
Well, the biggest thing, and we talk about communication a lot. We talk about it in our leadership channels. How do you communicate that with the team? Because there's only so many hours in the day. Some of it has to be presumed. Where do you go with that? Because I just joined your guild. I noticed there's 3 hunters and I'm the 4th hunter, or you guys have 6 healers and I'm the 7th healer. What do you do to bring that stuff into play?
A lot of guild issues, and really issues in life, are due to lack of communication, right? Or really poor communication, miscommunication, which could be improved through talking through things a lot better, or a lot more effectively. You need to communicate these things to your apps, to your players. Hey, we're going to have these tanks going forward. Oftentimes we'll have a plan set ahead. So for instance, when we were running 3 tanks, we let the tanks know which 2 were going to be in on which boss. Or if it's on farm stuff, we let them sort it out themselves. But for Mythic Progression, we have an idea of who's going to be in based off the strats that we have set up, which healers, which DPS, that kind of stuff. But oftentimes just you communicate to those players beforehand wherever possible, right? Sometimes you don't know until the night of. Sometimes, you need to rotate somebody out because they're just not having a great night and not clicking that night, and that's okay too. But again, just communicate. I'm not swapping you out because you suck. I'm swapping you out because we need more melee. We need more single target damage. Or, because, you're just not performing well. And that's fine too. I've been swapped out by the raid lead before on Kill Jaden because I wasn't performing well. And that's okay too, right? As long as you communicate effectively.
Well, I know that sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes there isn't communication, or sometimes I'll just take a look at it and say, no, this is just too many people. Mm-hmm. What sort of decisions when I'm out, I'm searching for a guild, what sort of questions should I be asking of the guild when they do have a fairly strong roster? And there are a lot of guilds out there that don't have enough to make 20 some nights. Mm-hmm. So you have to have a happy balance between not enough to raid and too many are sitting. What advice would you give to somebody looking, and what advice would you have for leaders that either have too much or too little?
So again, to me, that sweet spot, depending on your guild size or the guild type, is typically around 27 raiders for Mythic. I've seen rosters as high as 32 people, which I think is crazy. How do people see any kind of raid time? That being said, sometimes really competitive guilds may have a really higher roster because that gives them more flexibility, right? You're not going to have 4 quarterbacks on a team or out on the field at once, or 4 goalies. You only have a certain amount of set roles, so you may not be in on every single fight. How do I really encourage those guys? A lot of it is just talking to the players afterwards. So for instance, some of my apps, some of my fresher apps in the guild didn't get to see any mythic bosses the first week. And so at that point, you really have to just chat with them afterwards. Hey, I know you're not in for this first week here, where a lot of decisions are based off who we know is going to perform well going into those. They're not, again, a proven player in our eyes, so we may not take the chance on them yet. So, for instance, I spoke to one of our apps who was a little concerned that, he wasn't getting loot, and that's not a red flag. It's a totally fine concern. Why didn't they get anything? And I was very frank with the person. I said, hey, we're prioritizing our tier pieces and our gear on these players because we know we're going to have them in for Mythic. With you specifically, it's not because we think you're gonna run away or quit on the guild. It's just because we need to invest in these players first, but you will get your chance as well. Make sure you come to the normal raid, make sure you come to whatever else to get your tier as well. And then next week, as we know how easy some of these bosses are, I would expect for you to get in for some of these early bosses because we want to see what you can do in Mythic as well and how you can develop as a player. So again, it's just communication. That's all it is. Just communicate with your players with how they're going to be in or how they're going to be swapped out and what sort of they can expect, right? But again, it's communication. That's all it is. We actually had one app who just sort of quit, ghosted, whatever the term is these days, because he wasn't in for any of the bosses, and we had our sort of set Mythic comp. But he just out of the blue says, didn't even say anything. He just dropped the guild. And we're like, okay, well, that's that. Could we have definitely communicated better to him? Probably. We probably could have. That being said, you're an adult. If you want to choose to act like a child, so be it. Right? We have zero patience for that kind of stuff.
Well, and we shouldn't have patience for it. And some of that should be a decision before you join a new guild. Mm-hmm. You should have an idea of what the roster looks like. I know for myself, I would rather sit on the bench than be with a team that's not going to be able to raid because they don't have enough people. Mm-hmm. So there's a give and take there, but it takes communication on both sides. Now, in a situation when you're doing these progression mythic kills,
yep,
how much rotation of players do you do, or does that sort of happen after the first kills, or what's your logic on that?
It varies. Again, it always comes down to one big thing, and you hear me say this all the time. What is best for the guild? And sometimes what's best for the guild is straight up progression. I'm going to bring in the best players for that encounter, and that's it. Other times, what's best for the guild is a little bit of fairness between some of our players. If I know this encounter is going to be really easy, hey, I might give my apps a shot first on these ones, just so they can get some experience before we bring in the big guns and we definitely, just decimate the boss. There's things to consider, too many healers, too many tanks, too many DPS, an oversaturation of too many classes, which is sort of what we have now. We have myself, two other officer healers, another monk healer chi kick, then we have 3 apps, so that gives us 7 healers total, which is really too many at this point. Part of it is because one of our retired players is looking to come back. Well, he has to really reapply to the guild, right, even though he's already in the guild, but reapply to the raid team out of fairness, right, out of fairness to everybody else. And so that's giving us a couple issues, but we're trying to be as fair as we can with rotation, with everybody getting experience. I don't know, in my eyes, the ideal healer size would be 5 or 6 tops, because you do want to have, I would say a healer core of 5 or 6. Some encounters need 5 healers, and having that 6th healer sort of rotate on the bench is ideal. Or the alternative is some of your DPS go heals as well, or your healers go DPS, and that makes you a much more versatile player to have that kind of flexibility.
I don't know. If I was looking at your guild, you have the officers and the GM. 3 of them are healers. As a healer, I'd probably look somewhere else, but that's just me. Well, because those 3 are going to be there. They have to be there. They're the raid leads.
Yeah, generally so, right? And that's a question that we tell to our healer apps. Hey, how do you feel about sitting knowing that 3 of the leadership are healers themselves, right? Yes, Roshi has gone to tank for us. For instance, he's our Resto Druid. He's gone to Guardian tank for a 3rd tank slot, even on Mythic bosses as needed, which is great because it frees up a healer slot for a new potential applicant and give them some experience. But it really depends on what is going to be best that encounter, whether it's going to be a Resto Druid or is it going to be a Priest, right? It really does vary.
Well, it's been exciting, and I know that, whenever you have a new tier, you also have more people coming back. Mm-hmm. And I think especially in a guild that's maybe not quite as progression-minded, I know Zeros to Heroes has had a whole lot more people on the bench because a lot of people come back. How do you capitalize on that and make it so that you have them stay? We always joked about people who only came back to get the gear for the tier and then would disappear again and come back later.
Well, we can joke about it. I could have my own thoughts of that's not really respectful to your team and the rest of your players, right? Because again, there are people behind those computer screens, right? And you're wasting everybody's time to just get your achievement and collect your gear and that's it. But it comes down to the connections you build, right? As a team, as a guild. Yes, there's been low points in this expansion so far in Tomb, and every team, every guild, really, I think, goes through a lot of those things. There's a lot of those teams definitely go through those things, but I don't know. It's again building those connections. It's it's doing what you can to really help support the team and really invest in players, right? You just got to give people a chance sometimes.
Well, and it's a very good point. But everything that we do within Warcraft is building. It's building the team. It's building the community. And I think that's probably what we want to cover next week in our podcast, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. So, really, on our closing thoughts of the podcast, next week we'll be talking about Winter Veil. We have some really cool announcements for you guys, for the community here, Death Justice Zeros to Heroes, the Warcraft community in general. Some really good ways to give back to your team. You know, we have Secret Santa things lined up, and we have Christmas cards and those kinds of, and some extra presents going out to mugs. Did you know it takes me $40 to ship something to Singapore to a guildie? A small 6x6x6 box. That is not a fun time. I'm sure it'll be arriving at some point in the next month. But anyway, so we're doing lots of little fun things with the community, with the guild. The other big thing is Buddy Birds, right? Our hashtag Buddy Birds, where we'll be getting people from the community, people from the guilds, their Violet Spell Wings, which is definitely something exciting and fun. So a lot of Winter Veil stuff, lots of Buddy Birds. Expect some contests and ideas and fun things to get you guys involved into our next podcasts.
Well, and those are some of my favorite activities, so I can't wait.
Oh, I can't wait. I know this is sort of right up your alley. It'll be a great podcast, so I'm looking forward to it. So with that, thank you guys for listening, for watching. Have a good afternoon, good night. We will see you next week. And as always, thank you so much, and live your life heroically. Have a good one.